2030, and I'm 90 years old. And I live in a lovely house in the backyard of my daughter's house. And you're a registered guard reporter who came by to see how do we do this? How'd this happen? And so I'm responding back in my rocking chair, letting you know, as Jeff said, I have the privilege and the pleasure of working with the people in Lane County who've been mandated, about 90% of them, who've been mandated to treatment for having hurt people. And so I have the privilege to work weekly. I lead 7 groups a week myself. And so I have the privilege to work weekly with people that we are more directly trying to change their actions. And I'm passionate about both the joy of working with them and their responsiveness to what we tell them, and their desire to walk in the world in a different way. My own life mission is to make it a safer place for children. I have 6 grandchildren, and I wear this necklace all the time to remind me that all children should have the benefits that my grandchildren have, and they don't. And so it's both my grandchildren, my children, and my responsibility to do what we can to try to make that happen. So making a safer place for children is the guideline that has certainly driven the latter part of my life. So responding to you as a reporter, I say that reducing child maltreatment in Lane County has been a project for the entire community. If it takes a village to raise a child, it also takes a village to keep a child safe. Part of that task is making a safe place for the parents of the children. Why we ever thought that the people who came to our attention for treating their children badly would treat them better if we as a group treated the parents badly, I'll never know. That's a mystery. But certainly for a period in our history, we thought that, and we did that. When the community realized behaving unpleasantly was a pervasive community problem rather than a behavior of just a few, we were on the way to reducing abuse toward our most vulnerable citizens. When we realized that we each had a responsibility to walk in the world with a pleasant attitude and a tolerance for other people's struggles, we were on the road to creating a safer, more pleasant environment for everyone. When we realized that the same interventions that heal people of their trauma were the best guidelines to follow when dealing with people who were hurting people, we were on our way to reducing child abuse. People who were being treated with sincere curiosity, sympathetic listening, non-judgmental interventions were influenced to treat their children in a similar way. When the entire community agreed to look personally how we each conduct ourselves in relationships, that was a real breakthrough. What a surprise to realize how often verbal and emotional abuse happened in the carrying on of daily business for all the citizens of Lane County. The television campaign that we ran with vignettes of normal people being rude was a real eye-opener for a lot of people. And then we wonder why, television campaign resulted in more people realizing how many people in positions of leadership slide into being verbally and emotionally abusive when irritated or frustrated. The classic vignette was the pastor who was screaming at the little boy on his bike as the child used the landscape mounds in the church parking lot as dirt bike jumps. Watching the child, after having been roundly insulted by the pastor, ride his bike home to scream insults at his little sister was followed by a message across the screen. And then we wonder why. Another difficult to forget scene was the lawyer insulting his client and throwing his briefcase across the hall, in the hall outside the courtroom, while waiting to represent his client for a domestic violence crime. We follow the client home to watch him throw his dinner across the room. And then the question, and then we wonder why? The vignette of the coach yelling at the first graders for not paying attention at the soccer game sticks in the mind, as does the scene of the parents insulting and attacking the coach. When we see the 6-year-olds bully another child, the statement is made, and then we wonder why? By raising the questions in the mind of the viewers after each segment, we were able to make the point that the whole community is responsible to behave in a pleasant, non-abusive way if we're going to solve the problem of child abuse. When information is presented in this way, it becomes less difficult to understand why people who look to these people as role models for behavior often default to abuse in their own times of frustration. We wanted to have a phrase that gently brought to mind that rudeness and unkindness was a luxury that the children of Lane County simply could not afford for the adults in their village to indulge in. And then we wonder why became a community reminder. Over the last 20 years, those words, kindly spoken, have changed the communication patterns of the citizens of Lane County. Be it a truck driver, a landscaper, a doctor, lawyer, merchant, or chief, and then we wonder why, has been the call to responsibility to think about what we're saying and how we're saying it. We as a community have learned to hold ourselves accountable and accept responsibility for the emotional energy in our own personal force field. Remember in grade school when you took the magnet and you poured the metal filings over it, and then you observed and oftentimes traced the pattern that the magnets made, their force field? Well, the people of Lane County became aware of their own personal responsibility for the energy in their personal space, in their own force field. Not unlike bad breath or body odor, but far more damaging is verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse. The need to use personal speech hygiene for the whole community was acknowledged and acted upon. Motivating the majority of the people to want to live in the world differently proved to be a challenge. When we landed on the idea of visiting service clubs, government agencies, school teachers and in their in-service trainings, and any other group we could find meeting together and giving short talks on how to better understand their brains and how thoughts are infused with emotion and how that emotion has energy and how that emotion that they take with them charges their space, we then were able to help them see how they could be in charge of their emotional responses, how I can be in charge of my emotional responses. We were able to capture our audience curiosity, and they signed up for further training. That was the beginning. The television campaign created curiosity in the community as to wondering if it was possible to not be verbally abusive in moments of great frustration, and if so, how do you do that? The community classes on understanding your brain and the high personal cost of being unpleasant answered the question. Yes, people can walk in the world in a pleasant and kind manner. The choice is theirs. The surprise of the people when they realize that indulging in their anger and rude behavior results in their own life being shorter, results in a variety of physical problems that are painful, was a motivation for them to learn to live in the world a different way. As large groups of people learned how to manage their emotions in such